The Pulitzer Prize is an award for achievements in newspaper, magazine, and online journalism, literature, and musical composition within the United States. Darnella Frazier, who was 17 when she recorded George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis last year, was awarded this special citation by the board on last Friday.
She made a quick decision that would change the course of history. She took out her phone. She started recording what became the murder of a man in the street in broad daylight under the knee of a police officer. She chronicled the departure of life from the body of the man we now know as George Floyd. Today, Darnella Frazier was recognized with a special citation from the board that awards the Pulitzer Prize. As Reuters reported it today, quote, "The citation at the 2021 Pulitzer Prize ceremony is a rare instance of the board recognizing the journalistic achievement of someone with no professional experience in the field, a striking distinction in the genre sometimes known as citizen journalism." Frazier, 18, was recognized for recording, quote, "a transformative video that jolted viewers and spurred protests against police brutality around the world."
So thank you all for joining us. We have with us Brother Eric Muhammad and Sister Rachel Graham. And Sister Rachel, I'll start with you first with this question. You know, over the years, we have viewed numerous video recordings of police brutality and murder that has been filmed by citizens. You know, what was it about this particular recording of the death of George Floyd that will cause them to award her with this recognition?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this afternoon. It's an honor to be with you all today. And what I'll say is that this is a continuation of what we've seen in response to the murder of Brother George Floyd, in that this is not the first murder, but it's the murder that turned things on their head, if you will. I would offer that also this is probably the first time that a piece of film single-handedly was the hinge upon which the door of the verdict swung. Had she not have documented his murder and had that film not been available, I think we could probably assume that this verdict would have gone a very different way. And so I believe those two things together made it different. I've got some feelings on the award in and of itself, but in direct answer to your question, I think that's what made it so different.
The actual award, I apologize. We're going to come back to hear your thoughts about the actual award. I'd like to hear your insight on that. Brother Eric, what do you think about, you know, why was it, you know, she was awarded this award?
Pulitzer Award. You know, I don't know why she was awarded it. I'm like my sister, you know, and want to get into her thoughts and going down that line. But I would say this: I'm sure our young sister is honored by the Pulitzer Award. But this reminds me of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad's words in the Message to the Black Man when Dr. King in 1964 received the Nobel Peace Prize, and he quoted, he would have honored himself and his people if he had refused the medal. I have a problem with, and we're just gonna go right into it, Sister Rachel. I have a problem with what they were saying about her being recognized in non-professional experience in the field, sometimes known as citizen journalism, because she was not out journaling or acting as a citizen journalist. And it is sad to classify the capture of injustice and murder in such a way. And I get it. However, I don't agree. And I want to remind us of her words while on the witness stand. Quote, "When I look at Brother George," she said, "George Floyd, I look at my dad, my brother, my cousin. They are Black. I stay up at night apologizing." Look at this Black woman, this Black teenager, apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and physically interacting and not saving his life, while tears are coming out of her eyes. So to me, it's bigger than the Pulitzer Award. You know, so back to your original question, why they did it, you know, I don't know, but I think that when you start looking at everyone is trying to get on this bandwagon to say that they've done something. Could that be it? I don't know. But we have to look at it. And I would just say to my sister, and I end with this point, the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan: the reward comes after the work is done. Accept the award as an encouragement to keep on working. So we're going to keep working and keep doing the work out in the community.
Well, since Brother Eric touched on, let's go right back to Sister Rachel. So what do you say as well?
So my initial response was almost going along with the sheep, in that I am glad that there was some recognition of what she did and what she sacrificed. She was at that time, and I'm gonna kind of counter your position, Brother Eric. She actually was demonstrating the purest form of what journalism is, and that is to chronicle the real-time current events that impact us as a people. There's actually an article, I did a little crib cheating. There's an article, an opinion piece on CNN.com from a writer by the name of Mickey Kendall. And her position, and I agree with it, is that the Pulitzer was not enough. And it follows kind of this history of rather performative awarding, if you will. What is it? A day late and a dollar short. So they actually, if I'm not mistaken, set up a fund to recognize the contributions of Sister Ida B. Wells. And my understanding is that it was supposed to be a $50,000 prize that was to acknowledge who Sister Ida B. Wells was, and to award folks that were following within her footsteps, and to, you know, provide some type of monetary support of that. According to this article, those funds have never been expended. And so it comes across quite performatively, to be very honest. I do not take lightly at all what Sister Darnella did and its import, as I shared, to turning this piece on its head, to turning the actual court case on its head. And it is very much in the footsteps of Sister Ida B. Wells. A lot of folks, it's very interesting. There's a restaurant, or was a restaurant here in Baltimore, where I am, named Ida B's Table. And very well known throughout the city. Folks love going to Ida B's Table, and there are a lot of folks that would go who had no idea who Ida B. Wells was and the role that she played in the anti-lynching movement. Very, very similar as it relates to Sister Darnella. But I too have issue and feel like it very similar to painting Black Lives Matter in the middle of the street, very similar to all of the, you know, the commemoratives over the last year plus, recognizing and identifying and lifting Brother George Floyd up. But what real changes have in fact happened? And so that's my position. I believe that she deserves more than a Pulitzer. She deserves a fully paid college tuition, room, board, tuition, stipend, computers, and everything else. I believe that she deserves and will need, if you look at some of the things she said, some culturally sensitive counseling. Because what she also said is that she sees him at night. She has to live with this on an ongoing basis. To your point, Brother Eric, and I'll close with this, her story, what she shared, kind of encapsulates what we as Black people feel all the time. That we're in this position where the only thing she could do was record his death, and that she could not and did not feel strong enough to jump in to stop his death. And that's sad. And that's something that she's personally going to have to carry with her for the rest of her life. And I'll tell you, the work is not done, because you got 3 other folks that have to go on trial. All of them have to be make it through all appeals and actually go to prison. But then the question is, what is that going to do? Is that what are the changes that will actually happen?
You said a lot, Brother Eric. Any thoughts?
No, I absolutely agree. And that's why in that point I was stating that she was not out journeying or acting as a citizen journalist, but I definitely agree with the fact that that is the pure form of journalist. And it's just sad that we have to put ourselves in that position, because, you know, the position we take is actually intervening. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that there, whenever you see something, you go change. The highest form is go change it with your hands, you know. But to further her statement, while on the witness stand, she did say about not being able to go because that wasn't her job. She didn't, like you stated, Sister Rachel, that wasn't her job to go and intervene when you're looking at police officers who should have been there actually doing that, right? So I agree 1,000% with what Sister Rachel stated. And that's what we have to get to. What is pure journalism?
Yes, sir. I want to pick up on something that Sister Rachel talked about in regards to, and you mentioned it too, Brother Eric, what she just the psychological and emotional impact that it actually had on her. And I had an experience where I was watching a movie, Two Distant Strangers, and I tell you, I felt so much tension in my body from watching the movie, and it was right around the time of following this whole case with George Floyd. So as we get near our first break, Sister Rachel, what advice would you give to people, especially Black people, regarding the dangers of constantly taking in these images? I mean, we have to watch it to be abreast, but what are your thoughts?
But do we really? Because I will tell you, I practiced extremely radical self-care, and I didn't watch any of the court case, because for me, what would that add or change? The bottom line is Brother Floyd is dead. Brother Floyd was murdered, and that was revisiting trauma. It was already traumatic to even know the case was going on. It was traumatizing to actually wait for the verdict. And so, you know, my suggestion is a little bit radical. Avert your eyes. Let it be the car crash that you don't look at. Because that constant filling of your mind and repeating and replaying and revisiting what happened, it does not feel productive to me to actually have that be a part of my ongoing existence. And so I'll read the details, but I did not watch any of the trial because I care too much about myself.
Yeah, and I like that radical self-care. Brother Eric, what do you have to say in this last minute?
I agree 1,000% with that. You know, the minister Farrakhan stated that whoever gives you the diameter of your knowledge prescribes the circumference of your reality, of how you're thinking. So if you constantly running that in your mind, right, then now that has an effect on your behavior. And like sister, I didn't watch the trial either. So what I did was I actually went and read the details, right, and what was going on. And, you know, and we have to get into reading and really looking at what is actually being said, you know, versus listening. Because a lot of words they say, we actually clear those words, define those terms. But when you're reading, you have an opportunity to look up words and see what is actually being talked about or discussed. So I agree again with our
Thank you all. So we're approaching our next break. So we're going to pause for some announcements from our sponsors. But when we return, we're going to talk about the United States Congresswoman from Minnesota, Sister Ilhan Omar, and her comments on Israel and the United States that received a lot of backlash when we return.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the listen live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
Representative Ilhan Omar, the Democrat out of Minnesota, asked a question to the Secretary of State this week about the international law and justice. Since then, she has been the subject of bad faith and scorn from her fellow Democrats and threatened with pariah status by Republicans.
The post linked to a conversation the Congresswoman was having with Secretary of State Tony Blinken discussing investigations by the International Criminal Court. Now, some Democrats viewed it as equating the United States and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. Several of Congresswoman Omar's closest allies on Capitol Hill defended her, and Omar herself released a statement clarifying what she meant, saying in part, quote, "To be clear, the conversation was about accountability for specific incidents regarding those International Criminal Court cases, not a moral comparison between Hamas and the Taliban and the U.S. and Israel." Joining me now.
Wow. So we're back and we're going to talk more about those actual comments. And Brother Eric, I'll start off with you just getting straight to it. You know, were her comments anti-Semitic?
You know, again, brother, no. You know, and sometimes it bothers me how we start doing the Michael Jackson and start moonwalking. You know, on this term, phrase that they put out there of anti-Semitism. You know, my question is always, what is Semite? Right? And the point that we have to begin to understand is that anything that we say about Israel turns into becoming anti-Semitism. I have this book called The Israeli Lobby and the U.S. Foreign Policy. And in this book, the author goes into it talking about you can actually write something on a napkin before you even write. You can give these politicians a blank napkin and they can sign it, and and the lobbyists will write on it later on what they want. So they are in the pockets. These politicians are in the pockets of the Israeli lobby and anything that they say, you know. But the point I want to bring out, I want to quote Dr. King when he talked about the Democrats. He said, "Our white liberal friends cry out in honor and dismay. You are creating hatred and hostility in white communities in which you are marching. You are only developing a white backlash. And as long as the struggle," he said, "is down in Alabama and Mississippi," right? So as long as this struggle is with the idea of what they call, quote unquote, the right or Republicans, then you got the so-called liberals, except Senator Joe Manchin out of West Virginia. That's a whole nother topic later. But they're with you. But when you start dealing with the Israelis who put in, we give them so much money, then all of a sudden now they want to come out. And you had a few that supported her, but you had quite a few that exposed themselves in how they really feel and how they really think. And I want to quote, last point, I want to quote Malcolm. He said, Brother Malcolm, the worst enemy the Negro have in the white man that runs around here drooling at the mouth, prefacing the love of Negroes and calling himself a liberal. And it is following these white liberals that has perpetuated problems that Negroes have. So I know she clarified what she meant, you know, but you can't think about it. And I want to give it to my sister, but this is so dear to me. You know, I love politics, but I don't have the attitude to sit there and listen to that garbage, right? Because when you think about when you think about Hamas, and they were in the mosque, brother, making prayer during the month of Ramadan. And the Israelis officers went in and was kicking the man while he was making salat, brother. So just as Joe Biden said that Israel has a right to defend themselves, the Palestinians, along with Hamas, has a right to defend themselves. It's not right. And it's totally injustice. And the Palestinians are the real Semites. So the question is, no, it wasn't anti-Semitic. She stood up on what was true. And our last point, and I'm glad Sister Congresswoman out of Detroit, Michigan, Sister Rashida Tlaib, met Joe Biden at the airport and called him out. I love the Gang of Three, AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, man. I love these black men. May God Allah continue to bless them. I'm done.
And that's what we'll do. And Sister Rachel, if you can talk about just your thoughts about were her comments anti-Semitic, and even share your thoughts about how what they call them, the squad, came to our sister's defense.
So I was waiting on Brother Eric to all the way clarify the difference between being anti-Semitic and being anti-Zionist. And to be very clear, you touched on it at the end, who the Semites are, who those who currently identify as Israeli are, and understanding the difference. I will say no. I don't think that her comments were anti-Semitic. I feel that, and I'm about to catch all manner of hellfire over saying this, but I gotta say it. That we have a tendency to believe that the abused cannot abuse. And so I never want to take away from the fact that, yes, the Holocaust happened, 6 million Jews were murdered. Okay, that does not indemnify them from being called to the carpet over the things that are happening in Palestine. Historically, there's actually a meme, I was trying to find it before we came on, that demonstrated what we're dealing with as it relates to the territorial dispute over Israel and that space that's going on. And it showed that the space that's being debated originally belonged to the Palestinian people. And how the Israelis came in, and there's a picture of a human and a dog. Not my analogy, but that was what was presented. And you had your puppy, and he'll crawl into bed with you. And at first, they're sharing a certain space, and they're ensconced in that space. And by the end of the night, you're on the floor, and your pet has taken over your bed. And that was the way that it was described as to what this dispute is about. Congresswoman Omar made some statements, and she was speaking truth to power. The United States has done awful things to people, awful things. We just got finished commemorating what happened in Tulsa. That was state-sponsored violence and murder of a people. It was state-sponsored. That airspace is controlled. There were bombs that were dropped on a city of Black people. And so, yes, there are atrocities that the United States has visited and still visits, because we just got finished having a conversation about the open-air murder of a Black man by a police officer. It's still happening. She clarified what she meant by her statement, but unintentionally, she called to light a very real reality that's going on. The United States has done awful things to people. Israel is doing awful things to people. We don't have to take it as far as a conversation between Israel and Palestine. Let's talk about what they've done to Black Israelis. Let's have that conversation about, I think this year is the first year that Miss Israel is a Black woman, and people are like, Black people in Israel, you doggone Skippy, we were there first. And so let's have that conversation. But like I said, we have a tendency to think that those people who have committed violence and have been victims cannot be called to the carpet for re-victimizing other folks, and then it's kind of under this cover of, well, they have the right to, and it's like, well, okay, well, who was there first? Like let's really have that conversation. And then I'll close with this, and I know you asked me this very direct question.
Mm-hmm.
I say go ahead to the gang of 3, and it's interesting. The squad is actually more than 3; it's 4, because you have got to include Sister Ayanna Presley. She just was not in the conversation, but she's a part of the squad too. And I love that. I love that you have this progressive group of women who do have a tendency to not want to follow pecking order and tradition and things of that nature, who came to the support of their sister and spoke truth to power in a way that is going to be absolutely necessary. I'll close by saying the thing that's very frustrating, however, is that some of our brothers and sisters who are members of the Congressional Black Caucus have a tendency to tell the gang of 3 or the gang of 4 they need to sit down and wait their turn. And I'll close with that.
Wow. Well, Brother Eric, since she opened that can of worms, I'm gonna give you the option, and we'll come back. I wanted to ask the next question. It appears as if only a select few of countries have the power to determine what countries are considered to be political organizations are considered to be terrorists, right? So you can talk about that, or you can talk about what she mentioned about how members of the Black Congressional Caucus kind of, they follow, they become like sheep. Either one.
Yeah. So when you look at, brother and sister, the American foreign policy stems out of America's domestic policy. And when you begin to look at America's domestic policy and how people are treated here, when looking at how certain segments of the population are treated here, then you can look at the foreign policy and see how they are treated there, right? Where the Israelis were saying that the Palestinians are not even a people. Just asinine, right? So you have a scriptural argument. So this is why the Honorable Mr. Farrakhan said, who are the real children of Israel? So you have a scriptural argument that they say that they are the true Israelites, right? But however, when you dig deep into it and you begin to see that the Torah only goes back 6,000 years, and you have the language of Hebrew or ancient Aramaic goes beyond 6,000 years. So when we begin to understand and look at this, you cannot be the original Hebrews, right? Because you come from a people that speak Yiddish, right? So when we began to expose all of this and you started giving historical data, historical information, then now they begin to say that you are anti-Semitic, which really is a cover, because the scripture also says that one day that the cover will be removed. And then how do they make that cover? Then they clothe themselves back in the garments of saying that they are natural people to that particular land, that God said that the land is theirs, which is in the scripture, but they're not the original Jews. So that's a conversation I believe that we have to continue to have.
And there's 1 minute, Sister Rachel. Can you add some more about the Congressional Black Caucus you want to share?
So that part right there, as to what Brother Eric said, he kind of, you went all the way back to 6,000 years, but I say that you don't have to go that far back. And you look at the folks that are calling themselves Israelis now are the descendants of those folks that were transported and repatriated from Germany as a part of World War II. And so let's be very clear about that. Like I said, no disrespect. I know you went through what you went through, but are you the original people? What I will go forward and say about the Congressional Black Caucus, I've had this conversation with others, is that if you look at the average age of a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, that'll tell you all you need to know, and that there is a stranglehold on the power structure of those folks that are members of the Black members of Congress. Most of the folks that were there got there when they were 35 and they haven't left. And so that is of concern. And I will say this to cap on what Brother Eric said. If you look at the condition of the worst case or the worst cared for people within your population, that tells me where your priorities are. Ooh. And so as it relates to what Congresswoman Omar said, yeah, the United States has some things they need to look at themselves. If we were to be brought before a world court, there would be a problem because we're not okay. And that's a good segue into our next conversation.
I know, yo, we could. Let me just go to this break. So we're coming up on our last break. When we return, our contributors will share their thoughts on the economic impact that this COVID pandemic is having on the most vulnerable communities, and we'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline is A Call to Action. Children's Health Defense files petition for Food and Drug Administration to remove experimental COVID-19 vaccines from the market immediately due to reports of more deaths and injuries. This FCN volume number 36 edition middle page article is a message by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan entitled, Blacks must no longer be a consumer nation. We must change to survive. To read more, subscribe to FinalCallDigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the NNVNews.com Final Call cover report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Low-income Americans are bearing the brunt of the effects of the COVID pandemic. Cities like Detroit are already facing a steep economic, racial, and inequalities and have emerged as a virus hotspot. Families are struggling to fulfill their basic needs and access to vital information about the pandemic, not to mention the nonprofits who are being affected by this as well.
Detroit, already facing steep economic and racial inequalities, has emerged as a coronavirus hotspot. Janine Kane is a mother of 5 on the city's east side.
My husband actually was laid off immediately as soon as the pandemic started because he works in a restaurant. And I was working 2 jobs and I was laid off from my second job.
Kane's worried whether she'll be able to keep her job as a home health care worker, the family's only remaining source of income.
We're going to still have to operate as if we have the bare minimum.
She's also concerned about her family's safety as tensions run high in their neighborhood.
The neighbors have been fighting each other. It has not been easy to, just explain to the children that a lot of people are coping with this pandemic in different ways.
Wow. And so I'll start off with you, Sister Rachel, because you actually suggested this topic, and I'm thankful that you did. From my perspective, it appears that much of the focus regarding the coverage of the impact of the COVID is dominated by the health impact and rushing people to get the herd immunity. Why do you think there's not a lot of attention on this aspect of the economics impact that it is having?
What I'll offer is that it's kind of the glacier effect, if you will. What we're seeing on the surface is what we're calling the most attention to. And so the immediate thing is people are dying. That's the easiest conversation to have. It's difficult, but it's still the easiest conversation to have. People are dying, and that's a very real thing. I've unfortunately had COVID touch me personally, having known some folks that have passed away. And so there's that. I don't think we even, this thing happened so quickly and spread so fervently because there was lack of leadership at the national level. I think that it was overwhelming, that it was kind of this living in this crisis response mode. I don't think people have actually sat down and done the math to realize that our economy is severely unstable right now. You have entire economic sectors that will disappear. There has been some conversation as it relates to the impact that the pandemic has had on the childcare provider sector here in Baltimore, and the work that I do with the nonprofit that I serve. We've been lifting that conversation up. And that when you do a stay at home, then that means that children aren't going to childcare providing centers, and what that means economically, especially when you have family-based childcare. So, Miss Sadie that lives in the neighborhood that watches, 5 or so kids in her house, she is definitely impacted. So I guess the short answer to your question is that it is so overwhelming that we haven't even stopped to have that conversation. I will share, there is an article that was posted around the 1-year anniversary of the first cases that we knew of in March, that was presented or produced by the census.gov, where there is starting to be conversation around what the virus is in fact doing to economic sectors as it relates to people that are unemployed, where you have the older sector, the older Americans who are making up a large number of the cases and the deaths. The larger number of folks that are unemployed are ages 25 to 50. And so, this is a very real thing. And I appreciate and respect that there has been, our resources are being returned to us by way of economic impact stimulus dollars. Thank you very much. But we're not having wholesale conversations about the fact that we have whole sectors of employment. And unfortunately, Minister Willie, you can speak to this. In the city of New Orleans, folks are catching it bad because you have an entire economy that is built on the need to travel. And you have, I think the number, I can't remember what the exact number is, but the largest employment sector in the city of New Orleans is the tourist sector. And the largest segment of people who work in the tourism sector in the city of New Orleans are Black people who already were not making any money comparably. And now they, it's even worse. So and we're seeing the spike in crime. And I know, Brother Eric, you are actually a part of a local nonprofit in the city of Houston, and I see a lot of the work that you all are doing. So from your perspective, what have you all been seeing in Houston as it relates to the economic impact of this COVID pandemic?
Really an excellent comment, Sister Rachel. And I think that, just bearing witness to that, it's the same thing all over the country. We're suffering as a people. So what we did was, when the city gave us a grant of $248,000, we had to spend it like in 15 days. And so my team put together a COVID webinar where we went out and we went door to door in our community, giving them the webinar number where they can log into Zoom and be paid to come on. And I tell you, brother, we gave away over $47,000, to our people. But the thing about it is that, as she is stating, we are truly suffering. So the solutions really have to be, as my sister was stating in there, that neighbors are fighting neighbors. So we go door to door now, creating block captains, because as a people, we have to begin to do for ourselves, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, or suffer the consequences. I agree with the fact that, you know, the economic stimulus, you know, but however, that's also creating a greater debt. It is helping us now short term. But as my sister was saying, you know, I really didn't know much about this until it was on the, in a broad sense, yes, but in a specific sense, as Sister Rachel was talking about, we need to have this conversation about what we can do in our communities. And I'm glad that she says she's a part of a nonprofit, because I'm the executive director of our nonprofit. So we have to begin to do collaborations throughout the country, you know, starting local and then also throughout the country. But I also want to highlight that in Forbes magazine, an article written by Nina, I think her last name is pronounced Burleigh, Burleigh, where she talked about Pfizer, Merck, Sanofi, Johnson & Johnson were actually dwindling and moving out of the vaccine business because of the dwindling profits. And the three big pharma companies she wrote are experiencing a complete astronomical profit overhaul resulting from the government's Operation Warp Speed of $22 billion doled out to big pharma. So where is this money going, right? So in the last segment, we're talking about money going to Israel. Now we're talking about money going to big pharma. What about monies coming into the inner cities of the Black and Latino or Hispanic communities so that we can begin to address this problem? But I agree with Sister Rachel. We gotta have this conversation, dear sister. So after this is over with, let's connect so we can begin to build this conversation with other nonprofit organizations.
And Sister Rachel, we're closing. We're a couple of minutes away from our end, but take us home. What are your additional thoughts you want to add onto this topic?
I will add that there are people out there who use the pandemic as an excuse to visit violence on our folks. And so one of the things that's happened is that you've seen the eviction moratorium is going to be running out in the next couple of weeks. Landlords using that excuse to kick out folks, to raise the rent and look to gain more money. The other thing that I would say is that this is a unique opportunity for Black-owned businesses, particularly restaurants, because there's a lot of vacant real estate out there. So far as commercial spaces, that's going to become available. And so I agree with you, Brother Eric. We need to get together and find some solutions for self-sufficiency out of this situation.
Commentary. Thank both of you on your commentary. Was amazing. Amazing. I know Brother Eric, it comes on monthly. About Sister Rachel, if you can, you know, this, what is this, the second or third Monday of every month? It will be you all, and it just dynamic. So we thank you all for tuning in. We also thank our viewers. Make sure you subscribe to NNV on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on other social media platforms, and comment as well as it relates to the commentary that you've heard, and share the video. So this is your brother Willie Muhammad with National Network View. Thank you all for joining us today.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.